Zoom Fit Nation, we are here with the one and the only Ray Gorman from ActiveLife. Ray, how's it going?
Maddie, thank you for having me. It's going great.
Well, we're super happy to have you. Thank you for joining us. So listen, I'm going to give you an idea. I've thought about a training program that I've been thinking for myself, and I think I've figured it out. I'm going to do high pull eccentrics and high rep snatches for about 8 weeks. And I'm going to just develop explosive power. Tell me why that isn't a great idea.
Well, I think that you would be leaving a lot on the table as far as what your goals were. So whenever somebody comes to me and says, I want to develop explosive power, for example, like you had said, the first thing that I need to get to the bottom of is, what does that mean to you and why is that important? So is explosive power defined by your ability to jump a certain height, by your ability to move a certain weight, by your ability to jump a certain distance, right, horizontally instead of vertically? And why are those things important to you? If I can get to the bottom of those two things, I can typically start to create some rationality as to, are you doing this for a reason that is ego-based, performance-based, or health-based?
I'm a CrossFitter, so I would like to add weight to the snatch 4 reps while also improving all other aspects of my fitness. So those are my goals. I believe they're reasonable.
Okay. Next question would be, what are you willing to sacrifice in order to achieve those goals?
No tough questions, please. No pertinent questions
right.
that I can't answer.
Here's the reality of that, right? Is that we have created this kind of mindset around, you should be able to do what you want when you want. The reality of a statement like that is it's dangerous. You should be able to do what you want when you have prepared to do it.
Okay.
Right? If I want to go run a marathon just because I want to, that is going to come with unintended consequences. If I want to run a marathon with the perception of, I'm doing this for a health goal, or maybe it is an ego goal, but I want to be able to run after my marathon, I've got to have a different approach to it. So I think that kind of by reframing some of these questions and by placing the thought process back on your athlete or by the client who is trying to endure whatever the outcome perception is, we can really start digging deep into why do you want to get there? How do you want to get there? And what are you willing to trade in order to get there?
Okay. Awesome. So maybe I narrow it down to something more pertinent to us and maybe more common. Let's say I'm a CrossFitter and I work out 5 days a week. I do class 5 days a week, and I would like to prep for let's say a local competition in about 4 to 6 months. So I am adding some cardio volume. So I'm running 2 more days a week, and I'm working on my high volume gymnastics. So I'm doing, let's say, handstand push-up practice, and let's just handstand push-up practice, also an additional 2 days a week. What should change elsewhere for me to accommodate this change in my training?
Yeah, so the first thing that we would look at as a company, or I would look at as a coach, is what are the assessments that lead me to advise you that you need handstand push-up volume or that you need gymnastics volume, right? So that would be step number 1. Number 2 would be, what are the things that you're doing outside of the gym that support the recovery necessary for the increased volume, right? One of the things that we talk about is a very simple equation that increased volume to your system requires increased recovery because it's increased stress. Often what happens is people are trying to find what is called the max recoverable dose. The max recoverable dose. CrossFit Games athletes are always looking for the max recoverable dose, right? What is the most amount of work that I can do in a given session to achieve this certain capacity? The reality is, most of us do not recover and take care of our bodies or have the ability to take care of our bodies the way that a CrossFit Games athlete does, right? So what we tend to see is this upward trend towards the point of diminishing returns, where your curve has kind of different kind of curve that we're talking about here, but your curve has flattened, and now the amount of work that you're putting in is no longer proportional to the old gains you were getting. Now you're also going to eventually hit what is called a maximum yield point. Your gains actually stop. This is kind of like your upper limit capacity. The problem is we don't really know where those lie for things like human performance, because humans are consistently outperforming the maximum yield as time goes on. So it's really kind of trying to find this balance of, what am I trying to achieve? What is the outcome there? What is my recovery going to look like? What is my diet going to look like? What is my sleep going to look like? And am I going to be replacing high intensity days with low intensity days?
So I didn't hear you say, let's say, mobilizing. Like, what if I added stretching 3 days a week and I drank more water? Why is that? Is that not a good thing?
It would be a good thing. Well, I'm not the biggest fan on static stretching anyways. I prefer things that are more active in nature. There's no research out there that's going to suggest that stretching has any implication on recovery or the ability to recover. Hydration, absolutely. What most people think is that taking a lacrosse ball, taking a band, doing whatever kind of mobilization you've classically been taught is going to improve performance. It may decrease your perception of tightness, but it's not necessarily going to improve your performance. So for us as a company, we are very big into assessing clients' ranges of motion, adding length where length needs to be added, and adding strength where strength needs to be added.
So how do you add length? Let's get to that then. If it's not static stretching.
Right. So it would totally depend on what kind of limitation you had. Okay, so there are certain things that can limit ranges of motion. One of them would be what is called a musculotendinous restriction. So this is like what you would feel when you do a calf stretch, for example, and you're feeling it in the back of your calf, the back of your leg. So for something that is musculotendinous in nature, it's going to feel springy, it's going to feel stretchy. We would want to use something that had eccentric load, so the lowering portion of a lift. So if I go up on, like an example for the calf would be eccentric ankle dorsiflexion. Let's say I'm standing on my staircase, balls of my feet are on the edge of the step. I go up into a plantar flex position, so my heels have elevated. I'm then going to slowly lower myself down to where now my toes are above my heels, and I am in what would now be dorsiflexion. So that would be an active way to load into a stretch to increase range of motion.
So why does that occur in an eccentric and doesn't occur in a static stretch? Because it seemed like mechanically I'm doing the same thing, at least anatomically the tissue is longer at the end range.
The big piece that you're going to miss with static stretching is that you're not going to get any of the strength gains from going into the new position, right? You are also, when you static stretch, you may be decreasing your brain's perception of tightness, right? But you're going to have a better outcome from the active role. So the more active that we can get people, number one, now we can start to save them time, because if I take your mobilization work that is typically taking you 20 minutes and I have to add that to your warm-up, that's, call it 10 minutes, now I've just given you 30 minutes of work. If I can take work that supplements both as mobilization and a warm-up, and now I've taken 30 minutes and condensed it to 15, there's no more precious resource than time.
What kind of work does both of those things?
That would be something like an eccentric ankle dorsiflexion.
Okay.
This is another reason why I have a big problem with something being solely classified as corrective exercise. Because any exercise, if prescribed appropriately, corrects something. So strength work corrects weakness. Eccentric work corrects musculotendinous restrictions, for example.
So are you saying that if I statically stretched before a bout of power production, a strength piece, or even like, let's say a Metcon, am I fooling my brain?
So what the research would tell you is that your power production would actually be less. What your brain might be telling you is that your perception of positions may be recalibrated, right?
What does that mean?
Meaning that tightness, something like tightness for an example, let's take hip tightness, is a perception, okay? Tightness is your brain perceiving what is going on around the region, irrespective of the actual range of motion in the joint. People can feel tight with both limited ranges of motion and with full ranges of motion.
Hold on. Meredith, are you watching this? This is for you. My wife is super flexible all the time, yet feels tight all the time. I love you, baby. All right. Sorry, Ray. Go ahead.
Right. So what we're typically finding in that case is the person who feels tight with full range of motion is actually craving stability around the joint, is craving control around the joint. And by adding in extra range of motion, or by decreasing that protective tightness, potentially in this case, you could actually be doing more harm than good.
Can we predict when injuries are going to happen?
You cannot predict when injuries are going to happen, but you can start to identify more risk factors for when an injury may occur.
Such as?
So, for example, you could look at in return to sport, right? We can't say, Mehdi, if you go back to CrossFit, you're going to get hurt. Can't say that. What we can start to look at in return to sport is, if you go back to CrossFit at this point in time, your injury risk is maybe around 15 to 20%, given your protective workload versus your current workload, or the workload that you're going to endure. Now that allows us to start making some decisions on, am I coaching an athlete who is going to the CrossFit Games and needs to qualify at a sanctional event, or needs to qualify during the Open? I might be willing to have the conversation of, that 20% seems pretty good right now, let's send you in there, right? Somebody who is training for general physical preparedness or just coming in for fitness, if we can start to say, you know what, 80% just isn't good enough for us to push it, because what is the setback worth? Well, it's not worth you missing a month in the gym. Then let's start mitigating our risk by picking and choosing workouts, picking and choosing intensities, picking and choosing movements that really fit the mold for what the goal is for the client, which in that case would be long-term training as the modality, not short-term success.
Even if while they were away from the sport, said client grew an amazing mustache.
Very true. The injury risk reduction is not yet proven on quarantine facial hair growth.
Listen, half of the audience is going to be wondering, will a mustache give you 20 extra pounds on the deadlift? Yes or no? Tell us.
That I think is true, but not until I get a haircut.
So if I am already injured, at least let's take something like something common, like I've tweaked my back or I have a low back pain. I've been taking a week off. I haven't worked out, but yet that pain is still there. Like, what am I supposed to do?
Yeah, so it's definitely having an open line of communication with your coach and starting to outline the things that you can do instead of focusing on the things that you can't. So the last thing that we want somebody to do who is injured is stop working out. Okay. Right? One, we don't want to break the habit of going to the gym. Two, we know that movement can actually, well, let me say that again. Well-dosed and appropriate movement can be very beneficial for people who are injured.
Yeah.
We just may not want to load your low back with things like heavy deadlifts, heavy back squats, fast explosive movements. We want to load your back with things that are restorative in nature. So how can we get you comfortable moving through ranges of motion again? How can we get you doing something like a reciprocal range of motion where you have some rotation, something like your arms moving on the assault bike would be considered reciprocal in nature. Local rest to the area might be needed, but can you still lunge? Can you still press? Can you still walk? Those are all options that we can start to instill. The other thing that tends to happen is how many people have had the experience where they went to physical therapy, chiropractic, back to the gym, whatever it was, and it just didn't work, right? Like I went to physical therapy and it didn't work. And I can say that because I'm a physical therapist myself. Yeah. I went to physical therapy, it didn't work. Well, what was your return to sport criteria? So the piece that we're starting to talk about as far as reducing risk for returning to sport or reducing risk for injury really lies in what we refer to in strength and conditioning as bridging the gap, right? Bridging the gap is the restorative workload between therapy and back to work in the gym. And if we get too aggressive on that jump and the bridge isn't long enough, that's where people get that, well, it didn't work for me mentality because they didn't build up enough for it.
So when injured, do you work out smartly?
Yes, absolutely.
And you said something about some things we need to rest them. Like, let's take my low back tweak. I mean, that anything I move with, I feel this no matter what I do. Now, if I warm up, sometimes it goes away. But how am I supposed to rest? Like, I'm going to rest everything.
So you're looking at something that would be called chronicity, right? So you have an acute low back injury is something that happened yesterday that is related to something that we did. It can be as simple as I sneezed and now my back hurts, right?
That has happened.
And that has happened to people, right? That has happened to you.
Yes.
That is acute low back pain, right? Now you can have acute on chronic issues, which would likely be what your low back experience is, where you've had this history of low back pain. So it's chronic in nature, but you have these acute events that create these symptomatic spikes or irritability spikes.
Okay.
And so classifying somebody's chronicity is going to help me determine, do they actually need to rest or do they need to keep moving?
Okay, so at this point, I like to do this thing called overrated, underrated. I'm going to shoot you about 9 or 10 questions, rapid fire, and you tell me if the first thing that comes to mind, and I might ask you why you answered what you answered.
Sure.
Good?
Let's go.
Manual soft tissue therapy.
Overrated, but still valuable.
How come?
Overrated because of some of the claims that have been made for what it does and how it's kind of the end all be all. Still valuable as a piece of the treatment pie.
Would you say
can't be the emphasis?
Got it. All right. Snatching and CrossFit.
Overrated.
Putting you in hot water. Putting it on. All right, fine. Bicep curls.
Underrated.
Underrated. Even if I do only the concentric portion and then I like short range of motion, like I like to do it to get that pump. Is that
even if you
good?
kip them?
It's still underrated?
Look, bicep curls have a great protective effect on a lot of the things that we do in the gym, such as Olympic lifting, gymnastics work. So, hanging from a bar. So I'm a big fan of both isolated bicep work and isolated tricep work.
Man, you just made every guy's day.
Yes.
All right. Well, now what we're going to do when we get back to the gym, folks, the Q neutral spine.
Overrated, but important.
You're equivocating. You're equivocating.
Right.
Is it? Yeah. Tell me.
It's overrated because it's impossible. It's important because there is this guideline of what would be acceptable, right? So
Okay.
I would rather have somebody focus on what they can do to attempt to maintain the most neutral spine as possible while not exposing their low back to the screeching cat deadlifting.
What would be a better cue in your opinion?
Create an effective brace.
With breathing?
With breathing and with teaching bracing as a skill.
Awesome. Next one, farmer carries.
Underrated.
For what?
For everything.
Everything.
Yes, the biggest pushback that we get on farmer's carry is that my grip goes, and therefore I can't load as heavy as possible.
You programmed farmer carries for me, and that's what happened.
You did. Well, what we just really exposed is that not only is your grip the limiting factor in farmer's carry, but it might be in other things that involve your grip, such as kettlebell swings, hanging on to deadlifts, hanging on to Olympic lifts, hanging on to a bar, a gymnastics bar for higher volume pull-ups. So identify the low-hanging fruit in the system and then attack that.
My ego is too sensitive for such truth. I think I know what you're going to say about this one. Static stretching.
Overrated, big time.
Fine. Cool downs.
Underrated.
Tell me more.
I always prefer an active cool down, meaning you're in and out of different positions.
Okay.
If static stretching allows your athletes to bring their nervous system from a 10 to a 4 before they go sit in their car at an 8, I'm good with that as part of the cool down. So cool downs are extremely, extremely underrated. Go for a walk, breathe through your nose, let your nervous system come back to reality, move through some positions that maybe were replicated in the workout, right? Like if you did deadlifts, maybe you're going through some cat camel drills, getting the spine moving. And I think that you're going to see that you perceptually feel better the next day.
What's wrong with being at an 8 sitting in a car? That's how I drive normally.
Yeah, nervous system regulation. We're really good at jacking our nervous systems up. we're very poor at bringing them back down.
Right on. Linear progressions.
Underrated.
Okay.
Linear progressions, simple and effective, right?
Okay.
Ride the wave of linear progression until you need variability. Once you need variability, install it. But until you need variability, ride out your gains for however long you can.
All right, last one. Hair product.
For me, underrated, man. I always got to put something in my hair.
Is this a thing with ActiveLife? Everyone that joins must have perfect hair game.
Larry doesn't put product in his hair, but I need to.
I don't think a product exists yet for Larry's hair.
I think that is also true.
So now, to wrap this up, we are living in the age of COVID. So we want to ask you, what have you been recommending to athletes, to coaches, to gym owners to do now that we're quarantined, maybe even planning for reopening soon?
Yeah, couple things. Number one, be patient. And this is advice for everybody. This is for your clients. This is for your coaches. This is for gym owners. This is going to feel uncomfortable no matter which side of the spectrum you're on or which position you're in. So be patient with your athletes who want to come back and go full force. Be patient with your clients who are a little hesitant to come back. Be patient with the processes as everybody is reopening and gathering new information. And what was valuable last week might not be valuable anymore. Number two is start with less than you think you need. So mainly in volume. Less volume right now, especially with movements that your clients haven't had access to with your supplemental home programming, right? Somebody who has a pull-up bar at home is going to come to the gym much differently prepared to do a workout with 50, 75, 100 pull-ups in it than somebody who, because of the shutdown, hasn't touched a pull-up bar in 8 weeks.
Yeah.
So you can't triage them the same. The person who hasn't touched the pull-up bar needs to get their hands ready for hanging from a pull-up bar, needs to get their shoulders ready for being tractioned in this position for X amount of time, needs to get their tissues ready for moving through repetitive range of motion. We're all going to come back with a much higher level of skill in movements like pull-ups, Olympic lifting, than we actually have the capacity for. So we've got to respect that the low-hanging fruit isn't our skill. The low-hanging fruit is our protective capacity to those movements.
So you're saying 1 rep max deadlifts, not in week 1?
Not a good idea.
Okay. Scratch that from the note.
Yeah, your first 6 to 8 weeks should be reacclimating weeks.
6 to 8 weeks. That's a long time.
It is a long time. You have to remember that we're accounting for a lot of things, right? This isn't just running or just Olympic lifting.
Yeah.
Because of the variable nature of CrossFit programming, we have to take a little bit longer than we think we need to start to expose our clients to various things without causing overuse injuries by just doing them 3-4 times a week. So it is going to take a little longer, but it's going to be worth it in the end. The outcome is not going to be affected by a short-term sacrifice. The outcome could be affected by a short-term spike.
Words of wisdom. So last question for you. What are you most looking forward to when this quarantine is all over?
The thing that I have consistently been booking and getting denied on is my appointment with my barber. Joe, my man, I'm ready to get this taken care of so that I can actually feel comfortable leaving the house without a hat on. I think that's got to be priority number one, man.
I've been asking Meredith to cut my hair. I think it looks great if I have a hat.
I think it looks good on Zoom.
Thank you. Thank you.
So,
Meredith,
there we go.
Well done.
Yes.
Ray, it's been awesome. We thank you for coming on to this show, this great show.
Absolutely.
And we hope to chat with you again soon.
Definitely, Maddie. Let me know anytime.
You stay safe.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it. You too.